So I'm Steve Murgatroyd. I've had a long history in online and distance education. I began teaching at the OU in the UK in the early 1970s, and then was Dean of the School of Business at Athabasca here in Canada in the 80s and 90s. And my big claim to fame is I launched the world's first fully online MBA program in 1993-94, and I've been involved with ed tech in one way or another since the 1970s. My first published paper was in the journal Program Learning News. So I go back a long way in this kind of space. And I've been playing around with AI since around about early 2000. Of course, AI isn't particularly new. Some of the early developments were in the 1950s and 60s at the University of Toronto and here at the University of Alberta. But there's lots of stuff going on. So I want to share with you where I think things sit and where I think we might be going. So here's the deal. I'm going to talk for a while. If, as I'm speaking, you have questions or you have observations, please use the Q&A, not the chat, the Q&A, to post them. And my colleague who's sitting in the background, Sarah from Contact North, is keeping an eye on those. And I will stop from time to time and see if there's something I need to respond to. So the aim is to speak for about 45 minutes and to use some of the time to deal with Q&A. So let's get going. This is quite a substantial show, so I hope this is helpful. And our practice is also to post the slide deck pretty quickly after the webinar is finished, so you'll have access to all these slides. So I hope they're helpful to you. So let's get going. I mentioned something about me. I mean, the other thing is I'm kind of addicted to writing. And so I published a book last year on AI and the future of higher education. And there's another book coming out later on this year, which kind of takes that thinking a step further, talking about the future of our institutions, not just about AI, but about all this other stuff that's going on right now as well. So a new book at the end of the year. But here's where I think we are right now. And thanks to Contact North, I was asked to do a series of interviews with some thought leaders around the world, and they're posted on Teach Online. And I want to start with the observations from some of those. David Wiley, who's done several webinars and is part of the interview group, says that essentially where we are right now is at the horseless carriage stage. We're kind of just using AI to do what we've always done slightly better. So that's the kind of horseless carriage. We still have carriages. We don't have horses anymore. We just have a different way of getting around. But essentially, we're doing the same thing. My good friend and colleague, Pasi Solberg at the University of Melbourne, who I was with in February, says, yeah, but actually it's worse, because what we're actually doing is many of the wrong things much better and much more efficiently, but it's still the wrong thing. We're still doing exams. We're still doing multiple choice tests. These are not really a smart thing to do if you're committed to equity and inclusion. And I think the other thing that David said that struck me as powerful was that there isn't a lot of capacity in the faculty or the organization to innovate. And that capacity is being sucked up by our kind of preoccupation with playing defense, is what he called it, but dealing with academic misconduct and plagiarism. Now, my kind of view of that is this is not a new problem. We've had this problem since the Ming Dynasty, when high stakes testing really began with public service exams, and cheating was discovered right at the beginning of high stakes testing. Their solution was somewhat less kind of moderate than ours. They just chop people's heads off. We actually suspend students or have some kind of disciplinary procedure. But one of the things that David points out and Ethan Mollick points out is that some of the ways we detect cheating are actually kind of legally problematic. So products like Turnitin, other kind of cheating detection systems are highly unreliable. And so you're likely to get many, many false positives here. But this is sucking up a lot of the energy and capacity for thinking and change and innovation in organizations. And I've discovered that in doing presentations at specific institutions. This is the issue that everybody wants to talk about. And frankly, I don't. I think this is about not being willing to change. I'll come on to that later. Here are some other aspects of what's going on right now. So we have a large number of our peers who have yet to start to use AI in any meaningful way. They may have put in a query into ChatGPT sometime, but they are not kind of getting into thinking about this as a co-pilot with them in teaching. They're not seeing it as a colleague. They're not using it in systematic ways. And most faculty in colleges and universities only use AI occasionally. Now, this is unlike your students' behavior, where at least, there are some studies that put this number higher, at least 91% of students are using AI on a weekly basis, and many much more frequent than that. There's a UK study suggesting that 96% of students use AI every day. So here's the thought. The students are smarter in using AI than we are as faculty. It's no wonder that we're worried about the situation with AI and that there are concerns about the way students are using it. We're not on top of this issue. We're not on top of this opportunity. And we're not on top of the potential of AI to transform teaching, learning, and assessment. So again, we're playing defense. And I think the interview I did with Peter Scott, who's now president and CEO of the Commonwealth of Learning, former president of Athabasca University, is that we've had a capacity to change the kind of dynamics of learning for a long time. I mean, some of the adaptive learning engines that AI enabled 5, 10 years ago are now much better, much smarter, much more capable than they were then. And so we are able to actually change the power dynamics between teachers and learners and enable learners to manage much more of their own learning journey. But we don't want to do that because we have control issues. And we have a business model and physical designs, architecture of buildings, which makes it very difficult for us to reimagine teaching, learning, and assessment. And so we're kind of stuck. We're stuck in an old paradigm of teaching, learning, and assessment with new kind of paradigms emerging. And so one of the kind of ideas I've been exploring is that we're in an interregnum, a period between the old way of working that we all are familiar with and are comfortable with, and a new way of working, which some of us are playing with at the edges of the institution in kind of pockets of innovation, but many are fearful of. And so we're in this kind of gray space between the old and the new. And it's not very clear to most people what the new might look like. And so rather than risk going over there in the new space, we kind of play safe in the old. So that's kind of what I'm seeing happening right now. And to put that in a kind of nutshell, I think one of the examples of it is this kind of preoccupation with we need policies, we have to have policy. And, we're a university, we need policies because, what else would we do? Now, I think it's way too soon for us to develop policies. Imagine trying to regulate the internet in 1994. We would have missed what was about to happen with social media. We'd have missed the whole collaborative nature of the internet. We would have missed the power of emerging AI. And so what the policies that have been put in place, and there's a wonderful collection of them in a number of locations, and we can point them to you, these policies are going to have to be rewritten repeatedly. Now, it's pretty good to have policies around privacy, cybersecurity, and those kind of things. They're not going to change substantially, though they will have to be nuanced. It's policies on assessment or policies on using AI for research or using AI for citations or using AI for project-based work. Those are the kind of gray areas where it's far too soon for us to have policies. What most of the policy landscape is trying to do, and I'll show you something about this later, is balance kind of security and privacy and responsibility issues with the space to be innovative and take risks. So that's kind of where the policy space is going. But the policies will not take into account what I think is about to happen on the move from AI as a kind of okay kind of knowledge tool to artificial general intelligence, which is coming up on us very, very fast. And do remember that ChatGPT 4.1 has passed the Turing test. So it's actually getting difficult to distinguish between outputs from ChatGPT and very, very smart people. And I think there's an underlying fear of faculty. I'm just talking about where I see things right now. There's an underlying fear of faculty, particularly in certain domains, that their jobs may be under threat. Now, they're under threat for other reasons. We have this strange guy in the States who's threatening institutions on the EDI front, cutting off grants and for all sorts of weird reasons. So there's that. And then we have these issues in the UK, Australia, and here in Canada of our international student numbers falling through the floor. And that's having a massive impact on our education system in terms of programs, faculty, and so on. AI isn't a really big threat to academic work because our job is to make human connections with students and make a difference to their lives. And if we're practicing compassion and empathy and are engaging with the students, then we have, a lot that AI can't do. But if all we're doing is transferring knowledge and testing for knowledge, you're probably going to be replaced by AI and should be, in my view, because that's not what any of us should be doing. Now, having kind of laid out a story of doom and gloom, I think we do need to recognize there are real pockets of innovation, some fantastic work going on right around the world. It doesn't matter where you look, whether you look in Africa or India or South Asia or the United States or here in Canada or in the EU or even in my old country, the UK, there's tons of really good stuff going on. So I pulled together kind of 5 domains of use cases where people are doing things that are well worth us understanding. But before I get there, just draw your attention. This is a promotion for Contact North, who are hosting this webinar, and I work for them. Here are some free-to-use tools that Tony Bates has been reviewing recently, so you can read his reviews. And some of them are for ourselves, for faculty. Some of them are for students. Some of them are about careers guidance, like Pathfinder Pro. And some of them are dedicated to looking at how you get into the trades, into the Red Seal trades, we call them here in North America. So draw your attention to these. These are all free and extensively used and tested by users around the world. So when you see the slide deck, these are all live URL links to those resources. So here are 5 examples of great uses of AI right now around the world. The first is for student support, mental health support in particular, and student retention. So a lot of work has gone on the retention front using a combination of data analytics and chatbots to work with students who are vulnerable to dropout or are struggling with the content of a course. But the more interesting development here is in cognitive behavioral therapies for students suffering anxiety, depression, or stress. So there's an AI chatbot called Woebot, W-O-E-B-O-T, Woebot, which is clinically proven to be as effective as most clinicians, most counseling psychologists, which is what I used to be, in supporting students with those specific mental health struggles. Not great for other ones, not great for schizophrenia and multiple personality and so on. That's not what it's for. But Wobot is actually now being deployed in a number of universities around the world and colleges to support students with mental health. But a lot of the focus has been on retention and on really looking at students who look as if they could drop out, but need some support to get them past some kind of hump. My colleagues at the Open Polytechnic in New Zealand were pioneering this kind of work 3 years ago and have continued to do so. So some great work here, and you could look at these examples to see exactly what's going on. Lots of stuff going on in the teaching, learning, and curriculum design space. One of the great free-to-use AI toolkits is a product called Magic School, developed by teachers, both K-12 and college university teachers. Tons of unique applications inside this Magic School box, including some virtual labs, lots of literacy and ESL tools, lots of tools for the creation of assignments and so on. But there's lots of developments in terms of using the kind of free tools that Contact North has made available for creating content, for creating assessments, for creating designs. I'd like to draw your attention to what's going on at the Technological University of Monterey, which has always been at the forefront of kind of innovation in higher education. And their Tech 21 initiative, which is now about a decade old, has changed the dynamics of teaching and learning, moving students away from classroom-based learning to community-based and work-based learning, linked to an integrated use of technologies to get them the knowledge and skills they need to solve real-world problems that their curriculum is now based around. So if you want to pursue something that's really quite marvelous, Tech 21 at Technological University of Monterey is the place to have a really close look. And many other universities, there are 21 other universities looking at that model and seeing what they can do to replicate some aspects of that. One of the ones that's looking at that is Dublin City University. I think one of the kind of solutions to our concerns around cheating is to reimagine assessment completely. One of the reasons students cheat is because we encourage them to do so. We put a lot of weight on grades. We put a lot of emphasis on assessments, and we make it clear these are high stakes. And so the higher the stakes, the more likely cheating is to occur. So my kind of cynical view is we're co-conspirators with the students in creating this environment where cheating is seen as something that's worth doing. I think if we reimagined assessment as authentic assessment, where we challenge students to present, to share, to do projects, to solve real world problems, I think if we change our thinking about assessment and we use AI to help us to do that, then I think we'd get away from a lot of these issues. And there are some really good examples of scalable, project-based, authentic assessments going on. Now, there are obvious issues with AI, and I will talk about some of those later. But I think this is one of the big areas where you're going to see a lot of use of AI tools, particularly as we get smarter with AI to create better, more focused, more personalized assessments. So for example, in our grad courses that I teach at the U of A, all students do a video-based presentation, and we use both the peer group to give feedback, but we also use AI tools to give feedback as well. So we're kind of looking at rich learning assessment environments using AI. And a lot of work going on here in policy and governance, but more specifically on the ethics of AI. A lot of teaching up to students about ethical uses of AI, helping them look at what the dangers of AI are in just simply accepting some material coming from ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or whatever, and saying, no, there are biases, particularly in our experience here in Canada, in relation to Indigenous ways of knowing and knowledge, and Indigenous culture, Indigenous health, for example. uh, because the systems are very Western, very colonial kind of driven systems. And so my colleagues in Africa, particularly Paul Prinsloo, has been challenging some of the kind of thinking we have about how good these outputs are. Well, no, if you take a different perspective, a kind of post-colonial perspective or an indigenous perspective, you have lots of issues with the kind of things AI is producing. I've mentioned the use of AI for organizational transformation, but I think one of the things we're beginning to see in some places is the emergence of new institutions or new forms of institutions which are enabling students to generate their own learning pathways. And so to some extent, some components of Tech Monterey are doing that, but there are others seeking to do that through the way in which they're working. So I think we're going to see innovation, not just simply in terms of courses or learning or assessment, but in terms of institutional experiences or the total experiences of a diploma, a certificate, or a degree. And I think AI will start to enable that. There will be failures here, particularly if they're motivated by cash, as opposed to the learning agenda. I don't think there's a ton of money to be made here yet, but I think some people will think there is and will start up universities or colleges based around AI and they will fail, which is the history of ed tech over the last 100 years. If you read Audrey Waters' book on the history of ed tech, which is a terrific read. So these are some of the big shifts that are beginning to take place. Sarah, is there anything in the Q&A that I should know about right now?
There's a few questions we can address. The first one is from Lewis, and I'm just paraphrasing a little bit here. In your latest book, you mentioned that part of the challenge in integrating AI into higher education involves rethinking and updating the goals of our institutions. Thinking more specifically about students, shouldn't we also be asking whether we need to redefine the purpose of higher education from their viewpoint? Their widespread use of AI tools doesn't necessarily translate into improved cognitive or academic development. Would you consider this a meaningful or even urgent area for us academics to explore further?
Yes, I think we need to get smarter at how we help students use AI. So there's a lot of work gone on the metacognition and how we need to scaffold students' use of AI tools so that they have a more structure. And in particular, I've recently written about Generation Z and how they're very kind of transactional in how they see higher education. And we need to shift that mindset. And we can't do it just simply by teaching and assessing. We have to redesign the entire engagement process and the learning process. So I think this requires us to think differently about things like class size. You know, like my first class ever was 750 undergraduate students. I think, what's the point of that? It was more like entertainment than teaching. So I think we have to start to reimagine our support for learning in terms of metacognition. And there are some things AI is not good for. And one of them is when you just simply have to do the work to master a skill. So we can show you some things. We can get AI to short circuit some of the hard work. But if you want to learn to play the piano, you still have to do the 10,000 hours of practice. And you have to practice all the time. And there's no shortcuts. You simply have to do the work. And a lot of learning is like that in education. So we need to do more around metacognition, structuring the uses of AI, showing how to scaffold, showing how to do critical assessment, showing how to leverage the tools, but to do the work. So I think, yes, we're going to have to redesign the learning experience, and that means rethinking some of our institutional practices. So some big thinking there, which will be featured in the new book as to some suggestions about how to do that. Thank you. I'll take one more, Sarah, and then we'll move on.
Okay, sounds good. This one's from Alyssa. There's a little bit of preamble here, so bear with me. There are better and worse ways to use AI. Most people understand it can be misused to shortcut the learning process, writing an essay without engaging in the ideas. But AI can also be a tool for developing and refining understanding when used well. Some students use AI to avoid the discomfort of real learning, which partly explains the defensiveness and concern from faculty. This is worsened by the fact that many students see education as a transaction, a box to check rather than a process of transformation. So, how do we protect the integrity of academic programs when confronted with that mindset? It's demoralizing, not just for faculty and admin who invest in meaningful learning, but for students who generally want to grow.
I couldn't agree more, which is basically the thrust of this Gen Z paper I've written. So when I share the slide deck, I'll share this paper, not published yet, but it's available on ResearchGate if you're interested. I think you're right. I mean, I think there's a lot of transactional students in the institution who simply want good grades to get good jobs. Not that those are connected anymore in a direct way. So I think we have to start to reimagine the experience of a classroom, an experience of a course, and make it more dynamic and more interactive. And we have to make grades less important and learning more important. So part of the culture change that we need to have is to focus more on formative assessments rather than summative, and to focus on peer-to-peer learning, not just instruction, and focus on authentic learning that's about real world problems or connecting the learning to some real challenge that they have to deal with. So I think we need to up the game in terms of the intensity of learning and the directness of that learning experience. And I think that means, looking at architecture of schools and colleges and universities, looking at how we use spaces, looking at how we use time, looking at how we use project-based learning. So I think we have to reimagine what teaching and instruction looks like. And that's the thrust of this paper I'll share when I share this slide deck. Have to move on. We're at almost halfway through. A lot of work's going on this policy space. Higher Education Associates, Strategy Associates, HESA.com here in Canada, has a repository of policies from around the world. And you'll see what's going on is this attempt to balance risk and uncertainty and ethics with capacity for innovation and collaboration. So there's a kind of balancing act going on between these 5 domains, the 4 on the outside and the 1 in the middle, going on in the policy space. You're likely to see governments getting more involved in regulatory issues with AI, particularly in Europe is way ahead of everybody else. But I think you're going to see this in Canada. You're going to see it with some revisions of the regulations in the US. So what's going to happen in the future? So the first half of this presentation is about where I see us right now. The second half is about where we're headed. And so I want to use a tool that we use in future studies, which is what I teach at the U of A, called the Futures Triangle. And it's a really simple but powerful tool. We look at what's pulling us from our understanding of the future. What's the pull of the future? What's the push of the present moment? We're being pushed by events right now. And what's the weight of the past? So that's how we kind of use this for a dialogue or a conversation. And you could use this with students. I've used it with students. I've used it with peers, other faculty members, to talk about what we need to be doing in the faculty. And so I'll begin with the weight of the past. We have lots of outdated infrastructure. So some of the things I'm trying to do are stuck in physical facilities that are no longer fit for purpose. So we have very poor bandwidth in the buildings I'm teaching in at the university, all sorts of issues. We can't, all of the students in a class of 40 can't use the internet at the same time. And you say, why? Well, we haven't updated the infrastructure. There is real resistance in the leadership of organizations like universities and colleges to fundamentally changing assessment regimes. So it's really tough to do that. And, like none of our courses that we teach, there's three of us teaching together, involve a final exam. And every year we have to go in front, we have to physically appear in front of the dean and justify ourselves for this. And I find this quite ridiculous. I haven't sat an exam for 32 years and I have no intention of starting now. We have severe resource limitations in terms of what we can do and what we can manage. We have, we can't have a lot of money to go to professional development time. That's one of the reasons we have so much difficulty is we're not investing in PD for our staff and our colleagues. And, for good reason, for some of the reasons you've just heard, there's real skepticism about where AI is and where it might mean. Here's some of the push of the present. I don't think AI is going to go away. I mean, there may be some failures along the way, which is more than likely. But AI is just getting better and stronger all the time. And, tons of millions of dollars have been poured into OpenAI, Gemini, and others. And so we're seeing kind of ubiquitous AI resources. If you look at the website, there's an AI for that. You'll see over 30,000 AI apps available right now. So there's lots and lots of resources. So it's not going to go away. So one of the pushes of the present is, what do we do with all this stuff? And students are asking that questions, faculty generally not. But one of the problems we have is digital literacy is low, both in students for reasons you've just heard around, scaffolding and metacognition, but also actual literacy, kind of literacy as in literacy as we've always known it, is also a problem in colleges and universities. So there's a very big Canadian study that shows that many of our students in colleges and universities operate at levels 1 and 2 on the 5-point literacy scale that the OECD uses, and leave college in exactly the same literacy level as they arrived. So we have a literacy problem and we have a digital literacy problem. And AI demands for efficient and effective use that you're really smart in digital literacy. We're using a lot of AI for efficiency in colleges and universities. So, we just submitted an RFP for a couple of $1 million through a not-for-profit that we're involved with, which we won, and it was written largely by AI tools. So we can reduce administrative burdens and administrative workloads. We can speed up things like financial accounting processes quite dramatically. And we also are seeing, the push of the present is, encouragement to use AI within institutions. JISC released their leadership study yesterday that shows that AI is one of the biggest single issues on the minds of most college, universities, and technical institution leaders in the UK. So there's a lot of momentum to do something with AI, though people are unclear what it is. And students are pushing us to do more and let them use AI more, but to support their use by helping them see just what the limitations are and what effective use of AI looks like. And then we have competing kind of versions of the future that are pulling us in different directions. So one of them is the Ethan Mollick kind of view of the world, which is we're going to be collaborating with AI. I said about 10 years ago, we're all going to be dancing with robots. Well, I think we're at that kind of point now where robots are, I'll show you something in a minute about robots, but I think we're now kind of at a point where smart colleagues are leveraging AI to support their own work as co-intelligent partners, which is essentially Ethan Mollick's position. Also, I think some of my colleagues are seeing AI as a way of dealing with some inequality issues, making more knowledge freely available to more people anytime, anywhere, at any level. And so part of the philosophy Contact North, for example, is they've developed a lot of these tools that are free to use so as to make more learning available to more people at no cost. And so I think we could begin to see one of the drivers for future uses as equity and inclusion, especially as some of the indigenous groups working with AI are now beginning to address some of the biases and some of the neocolonialism that we're seeing in AI products that are Western. There's an indigenous protocol that's been deployed that actually is beginning to shift some practice as well. But I don't think our existing structures, our just existing faculty structures, departmental structures, course structures, degree designs, diploma designs, I think these all get in the way of smart use of learning. And so what I don't see is the kind of metamorphosis at the institutional level that AI really demands us to start to think about. And I think that's one of the big constraints. And that's about leadership, and it's about imagining a different future for our institutions. Now, another futures tool is called the three-event horizon. And I'm going to show you that in a moment, but I need to talk about two other developments, or a couple of other developments that are emerging pretty quickly that will have an impact on what we do in our colleges and institutions. One of them is quantum computing. And if you're not familiar with this, let me just give you an example of how this could work. Right now, if you ask ChatGPT to look at a T.S. Eliot poem and offer a critique based on the writings of F.R. Leavis, that's exactly what it would do. It would use logic, looking at Leavis's work and say, this is a critique of, T.S. Eliot's poem. What quantum would do is look at 5,000 critics at the same time and provide a kind of summarized critique from 5 lenses in 1 minute or less. And it would do so and be highly reliable in terms of how it did that. So as a practical example, and if Caroline Levy's online, she's been working on this kind of stuff for a while with an institute in British Columbia. It's quite possible for us to discover literally thousands of new antibiotics rapidly by doing genome profiling simultaneously of thousands of genomes together to look at new materials that we could be using for antibiotics, which is exactly what Pfizer and Microsoft did together to identify 10 new antibiotics that are able to overcome these antibiotic resistant bugs that we're having to deal with in many hospitals around the world. So Pfizer are working on 10 new products, 4 of which are close to market. And that was all done in less than 3 minutes in terms of the use of quantum machines. Now, we're not going to be walking around with quantum laptops and sitting in rooms dealing with ideas at the speed of light. We'll have to rent time on these machines, and currently very expensive. But this will change our understanding of knowledge. And to give another example, there are 12 big problems in mathematics that have been with us for over 1,000 years. Quantum computers have already solved 2 of them, which have baffled mathematicians since time began. So this is a big development in terms of how we think of knowledge. And it's happening now, and it will accelerate over the next decade. And so this is going to kind of empower all sorts of new developments in higher education and business. And we're going to see a lot of new developments here, particularly around interdisciplinary teaching and actually breaking down silos, particularly in science. And so we'll stop teaching physics and/or chemistry and/or biology and start looking at a much more integrated view of what science is, which will be a good thing. Another development that some of us are concerned about, but also excited about, so there's this, schizophrenia going on here, is artificial general intelligence. This is when AI is smarter than most people, and most very smart people. So you could put, 50 Nobel Prize winners in a room and have another room with AI in it, and you wouldn't know much of the difference between the 2 groups. So that's the kind of big idea in a nutshell. It's a bit more complicated. But we were thinking that this might happen in 2040, 2050, but it looks like it could happen much sooner, particularly now that we've got a couple of the large language models passing the Turing test. This is very worrying to some people. Noam Chomsky, before he died, was preoccupied with this issue. And Noel Harari is writing very well and talking a lot about this issue. So there's some big issues associated with this. And the other development I think that we're going to see is a lot more robotics, are already deployed extensively in some school systems to support kids with autism, already deployed extensively in Japan and Asia to support elder care. And so I think we're going to see a lot of developments in robotics. And just to make the point, I want to show you a very short video. It's only a minute long. I'll tell you a story about this when it's finished.
Yeah, it's super funny. I really
Right there. How's this? Perfect.
So that's a robot developed in Norway and is available now commercially. I showed it last night to my grad students, and one of the women said that, oh, that's fantastic. I need one of those, doing the jobs my husband won't do, like cleaning the windows there. She thought that was fantastic and was wanting to know the price. So there are going to be a lot more soft robotics that are very compassionate, very developed a kind of sense of empathy. They don't really have empathy. They just mimic empathy. But as one of my colleagues who used to train psychotherapists and counseling psychologists said, that's what a lot of counseling psychologists do, is mimic empathy. So, you know, don't knock it. If it works, it works. So we're going to see a lot more of those kind of robotic deployments for mental health work, supporting elderly people, supporting people with mental health, supporting autistic and neurodiverse students. So we're going to see a lot more of that kind of thing. So I want to move to the 3-event horizon, and then I want to finish with kind of some scenarios for the future. This comes from McKinsey. It's a way in which we think about what's going to happen over time. And the first stage is, you know, you always defend what's going on right now, which is where I think we are, trying to protect what we know. But there's this emerging horizon, and then there's behind that another emerging horizon that challenges everything we're doing right now. So we're conscious of horizon 3 and 2 in defending 1, but are not sure just what 2 and 3 might look like. So I'll try and say what I think is going to happen here. We're already seeing, and we'll see more of this, like quite a lot of faculty starting to use AI for certain things like syllabus development, assessment design. Some are using it for proctoring right now. We're going to see kind of more deployment within the existing paradigm. In other words, we're not going to change fundamentally what a college or university is. We're going to do more of the horseless carriage thing. So that's fine, providing we actually use this time to enhance digital literacy of our faculty and students, and we actually start to look at some of the issues you've raised around metacognition and doing the work and not letting AI be a substitute for the hard work of learning. So we need to work out in this period, this kind of interregnum period, what it is we need to get to be able to use AI well. So we need to be a learning community, and we need to do more sharing across the world around what we're learning about metacognition, about structuring learning tasks, about a renaissance in assessment. But the next phase, which is when quantum begins to kick in, I think we have to start using the imaginative tools of AI and the power of quantum to start to reimagine the whole learning engagement process and our design for curriculum. One suggestion from colleagues who work in this space in Toronto, they work for Ametros Learning, which is an AI simulation organization based in Toronto, is that we, rather than enrolling in a program of studies, people enroll in an institution and negotiate their pathway to learning in partnership with a chatbot and a human instructor, who then becomes the curator of their learning journey. And we imagine what teaching, learning, and assessment looks like. And we could enable that through some of the technologies that are available, especially as AGI begins to become available to us. Sorry, I need to go back one. And then, I think the big kind of picture is unimaginable after 2040, 2045. We're going to imagine new institutions that break boundaries. And so we'll no longer have very clear boundaries between what a trade school does, what a college does, what a university does. We'll simply be in a lifelong learning space. And I think we're going to see a lot of developments of new kind of ways of funding institutions and learning agendas, shifting money from institutions to the learner journey. I think we're going to see some conversations about that. And there are some of that taking place right now in some jurisdictions. But there are different views of the future. I just reviewed a paper that was published in AI and Society called Bullshit Universities, which says, look, basically AI is bullshit, which is a technical term, meaning a lot of what it does is not true. And that what we're doing is what you were concerned about in the chat, which is encouraging students to fast track learning in order to get good grades and get them through. In other words, become more and more transactional rather than less transactional and more engaged. So that's one kind of pessimistic view of the future. And then the other kind of view that Yuval Noah Harari and Chomsky were promoting is we've got to stop this AI stuff because it's getting in the way of genuine thought and genuine learning. And so they were pressing for legal constraints on how this could be used in colleges and universities and schools, because they thought it would damage the kind of collective intelligence of society over time. And so there's a big push, and they weren't alone. I mean, there's quite a lot of people saying that at various points over the last 10 years. So there's this big kind of anxiety about what this will do to our collective capacity for thought. And so I think that's, given what we see happening around the world, that could be an issue. So I'm going to end with some scenarios for the future. This is quite quick, and then I'll take some more Q&A. I'm going to use two dimensions. One is where institutions make a conscious choice to either highly integrate AI into all that they do, or go the other way and say, actually, we won't. We'll have some, but we're not going to see it as core to how we do our work. So that's the blue kind of dimension that's here. And the red dimension is kind of traditional ways of teaching, classes, courses, 3 credits, all that stuff, and traditional ways of working. And the other side of that same dimension is, no, we don't do that anymore. It's highly personalized. Each student has their own learning journey. And sometimes they'll work with others. Sometimes they'll work on their own. Sometimes they'll work on work-based learning. Sometimes they'll work on project-based learning. So this is very much a kind of version of Tech 21 at the Technological University of Monterey, a kind of combination of the red and the blue. So that gives us these 4 scenarios for the future. And there was a meeting in Beijing 2 weeks ago where smart university colleagues from around the world shared some ideas. And there was a lot of talk about the smart campus, personalized learning, adaptive technology. So that's a live conversation. And there are some institutions exploring what that would mean for them. Most institutions are still at this low integration university college as a artisan place, the kind of bottom kind of space here, the low integration traditional teaching space. So the question is, who's going to move into the traditional teaching space supported by AI, but not be seduced by the other option of going down the more personalized learning route? So these are 4 scenarios for the future that I think we're going to have to start to talk about. And to put it frankly, there are some ministers of education engaged in these conversations as we speak. And so, you know, this is a political conversation as well as a money conversation, as well as a strategic one and a moral, ethical, and pedagogic one. So we're in the midst of change. And so I'm going to stop and say to Sarah, what do I have to deal with that's in the chat? Because no doubt there are a few things.
Oh, absolutely. We have a number lined up here. So I'm going to go with one that was upvoted. So that just means that there was more interest in this one. This is from Elizabeth. Some worry that the use of AI will diminish critical thinking abilities. How do you see the role of critical thinking in this era of AI-facilitated learning?
I think we should be teaching critical thinking from grade 1 in school. It's a massive skill. I mean, we're in this situation where many people don't have that facility of critical thinking and critical assessment because they have low levels of literacy. So looking at the OECD PIAC data, so this is objective data, it's not my view, I'm just sharing what it says. The average reading age of the US adult is grade 6 and 7, and 20% of US adults are technically, according to the OECD, illiterate. So, you know, that's one context. In Canada, 42% of our workforce have levels of literacy at levels 1 and 2 on a 5-point scale. And yet most of the work that we're asking people to apply for, most of the jobs available, are at levels 3, 4, and 5. So we have a massive problem already just with literacy. And I could talk about numeracy as well. The PIAC data talks about that. But we have this critical capability gap that we have to start to fill. And frankly, the speed at which some of the generative AI models are moving, with artificial general intelligence looking nearer rather than farther away, we're going to be overtaken by smarter machines than smarter people making decisions. Some of you may say we're already seeing that in a couple of countries where the governments of a couple of countries are not as smart as AI. So I think we have to be very conscious about this as a task. And I think it should be built into every single curriculum at every single level, K to PhD. I don't think it's an option. So we challenge students in the courses I teach to demonstrate critical assessment, critical ability, and to criticize each other's ability to do that as well, to build up a peer support for critical assessment and critical thinking. And one of the ways we do that is by insisting on oral presentations, not just written ones, which we can use all sorts of tools to assess, but we get them to show us how they're thinking through oral presentations. So I think there's a lot we can do to improve that. A great question. Thank you. Another question, Sarah.
Yeah, this one's from Martine. She's wondering if you can suggest researchers or practitioners or organizations that would be interesting to follow in order to learn new practices or experimentation. So before you answer this, I'm going to put a link in the chat to our snapshots of teaching with AI series. So that's one there. And then Stephen, I'll let you finish the rest.
So I would keep an eye on Ethan Mollick in LinkedIn. So Ethan is a prof at Wharton, he's a prof in the business school at Wharton. His book is very inspirational, co-intelligent partner. But he's tracking what people are doing with AI. He also has free to use a prompt library where you can build simulations, you can build student activities, you can build all sorts of tools there. So Ethan Mollick is one. And then again, if you follow teachonline.ca, there's some terrific stuff on instructional design being shared there by some of the leading thinkers in the world. So keep an eye on Teach Online, because what Sarah's trying to do with that resource is connect you to some of the best thinkers in the world through that space. So I encourage you to look at Teach Online and Ethan Mollick. Next question.
Okay, this is from Ashlyn. I see a lot of options for reimagining teaching and learning in universities, but it seems harder in colleges where there are more standards, oversight, and restrictions. Any advice or thoughts about this? I'm specifically coming from the Ontario college system, and I'm sure about the other systems.
Yeah, I'm trying to get a piece in the conversation about how to rethink skills development, because in my view, our apprentice system, for example, is broken. So our graduation rates are 35%, 38%, depending on gender, after 4 years. Whereas in other European countries, it's 92% after 2 years for the same trades. So I think we have to reimagine what skills-based learning looks like and what the work of colleges looks like. And I think we need to shift from our current time on task journeyman model, time on task with a journeyman model for apprenticeship, into competency-based learning and competency-based assessment and assessment on demand, so that I can finish at any time by submitting evidence of my skills and capabilities. And frankly, we shouldn't care how you develop those skills as long as you have them and can demonstrate them consistently. So I think we have to reimagine what a college is, particularly in terms of the skilled trades, but also for other things colleges do, like legal assistance, educational assistance. I think the same thing would apply. So I would reimagine as going back to what colleges did in the 1960s. I'm old enough to remember when we were using DACOM to develop competency-based frameworks for program development and assessment. So I think we need to kind of blow up our existing kind of thinking about how to teach and learn in a college and move on to competency-based assessment. Not a popular view, I would point out, but it is the view I take. All right, we're coming up to time. These slides plus the paper I've written on Gen Z and AI will be shared by Sarah once we're done. But I'd like to say thank you for participating. Some really good comments in the chat, and I'll see you next time. Have fun. Be well.